Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so there's been a lot of talk recently about the Illuminati in the MCU. Like, it just started blowing up on YouTube, and I really didn't even know why. I was like, why in the world? Not even on YouTube, right? Like on social media, Twitter and all that kind of stuff. I was like, why in the world is everybody talking about the Illuminati? Well, I went to Instagram and looked up, well, actually, I found him through Tony, TC Does Comics, but this Instagram account called Illuminerdy, which is actually really awesome. Like, you guys should check him out. He's pretty solid and has some really cool stuff on there. Apparently, he breaks a lot of news, things like that. Apparently, it's like Kevin Feige and them are trying to find a way to put the Illuminati in the MCU, so it's more or less confirmed in the sense that like they're working on it. We just don't know when exactly they're going to show up. And it got me thinking, because one of the big responses that I saw from people was that if the Illuminati are going to be in the MCU, then how can you do the team without Iron Man? But here's the important thing to understand, guys. Yeah, Tony Stark was part of the Illuminati, but he was by no means the most important person on the team. The benefit about the Illuminati when it was originally created by Bendis and when it was expanded upon and I think improved by Jonathan Hickman during Avengers and New Avengers is that each member of the team had something to offer that made them unique. So it wasn't like it's centered around Iron Man, right? I mean, he was a leader, you know, insofar as, you know, anybody could be a leader with a team full of leaders, but you don't really need Iron Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to make the Illuminati work. The real question to ask here is, what are the Illuminati and how do you put them in the MCU? The Illuminati were basically this super clandestine group. Originally, it consisted of Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Professor X, Doctor Strange, Black Bolt of the Inhumans, and Namor the Submariner. Now, Black Panther and Captain America were kind of this quirky little situation that you had going on, right? So the initial meeting of the Illuminati took place in Wakanda, and it was done, of course, at the permission of Black Panther, because nobody gets into the Kingdom of Wakanda without Black Panther's permission, right? Otherwise, they end up getting killed, or they somehow manage to escape, but they can get turned into sound like Ulysses Claw did, which is really kind of weird. But the idea behind this was that Black Panther was avidly against it, right? He was wildly against the idea of the Illuminati. It was like, no, you do not want to create some super secret organization designed to safeguard the world, right? This is going to end badly. Things like this always end badly, and it has ever since the dawn of modern man, right? You don't want to do this. The Illuminati did it anyway. Now, the reason why I say Captain America is a bit quirky is because Captain America's involvement with the Illuminati didn't come until Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers run, that Captain America was part of the Illuminati at one point. Now, it ended up being that his mind was wiped and he was basically removed from the team because of the fact that he wasn't willing to destroy planets and the collapse of the multiverse and so on. And if you want to learn more about that, check out the New Avengers playlist down in the description. Really like the best Marvel comic book stories ever playlist down in the description. But Captain America's involvement was relatively short-lived, right? So that's why it's a little quirky. The idea was that this team came together as a result of a conflict called the Kree Skrull War. And the Kree Skrull War was a super important event that took place in Marvel Comics for a variety of reasons. One was because of the fact that in terms of the publishing side, it was like the first major cosmic crossover event that Marvel had that was done on that kind of a scale. It was huge at the time, and there are still comic book fans today that hail it as one of the greatest comic book stories ever told. Spoiler alert, it's not, but it is a pretty decent story. You know, nonetheless, the idea here was that each member of the Illuminati, Professor X of the X-Men, Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, so on and so forth, each of them had a piece of information that if they had brought their information together and combined their resources, pre-Skrull War never would have gotten as close to Earth as it did, right? Because it almost laid waste to the entirety of the planet. And so the Illuminati formed as a kind of think tank, in the sense that each member would basically share information with each other so that everybody had a kind of complete picture in terms of the various threats that were facing Earth, and that if one of those threats seemed small, they could compare their information and find out it's actually a much bigger threat later on down the line. And so with that in mind, putting the Illuminati in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a pretty easy task, right? It's a pretty easy thing to do. The only difficulty that really comes here is from things like Namor the Submariner, or from things like Professor Xavier of the X-Men, especially because of the fact that the X-Men have not been established in the Marvel Cinematic Universe yet. But there's a quick, simple workaround for that. So for somebody like Namor the Submariner, that's simple, right? Atlantis was always a kingdom that had, you know, a very difficult relationship with the surface world, right? It's like Aquaman in DC Comics, right? Atlantis never liked the surface because they always saw the surface as encroaching on Atlantean territory, right? And so it was one of these things where Atlantis was always afraid that the surface world was going to either engage in warfare with itself, which would of course decimate Atlantis, or they would somehow invade Atlantis, or something would pop off and Atlantis would be in danger, right? And so Namor the Submariner went through great lengths over the course of his time as as the ruler of Atlantis to, one, plant spies throughout the world, and then two, to become part of the Illuminati in order to kind of keep an eye on the surface world. It's the same reason why Black Panther joined the Avengers, to spy on everybody, right? To make sure they weren't going to become a credible threat to Wakanda. It's kind of cool. Like, and it's a little bit different in the MCU, but in the comics, Black Panther would set the world on fire before he would let harm come to Wakanda, right? Like he would go toe to toe with every single Avenger, and he would kill them all if he had to in order to keep Wakanda safe, right? He's a king first and an Avenger second. It's one of the coolest elements of his character. The idea with Namor is that's pretty straightforward. You simply just say half the life in the universe was blinked out, which included half the life on Earth during the events of Avengers Endgame, and Namor the Submariner doesn't want his people to struggle in that way again, and so even if the alliance with humanity is tenuous at best, he becomes part of the Illuminati in order to make sure that a threat like that doesn't occur again, right? So it's why we haven't really seen him before, because it's one of the things where it's like, you stay away, I stay away, but now I have a reason to get involved in what you're doing, that kind of a situation, right? It's a little thin, and we could probably find a way to sort of cook the books and make it work in a stronger way, but it would serve its purpose, right? It would allow us to achieve that. The trickiest thing here is Professor X, right? Professor X of the X-Men. How do we get him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe if the X-Men have not been introduced yet? I made a video previously where I talked about how to put mutants in the MCU. And what I did is I came up with this idea that was a combination of what happened in the Ultimate Universe along with the main Marvel Universe. And because of the fact that the introduction of the MCU is so close-knit with those two things, we can kind of leave out the comic book portion and just go straight to what I would do in the movies. All you would really say here is that that Captain America, as we know, was frozen in ice at the end of Captain America: The First Avenger. And the whole idea is, okay, Captain America was just believed to have been dead, right, alongside Bucky Barnes. What we also know is that around that time, that's when Hydra slowly began to start taking control of S.H.I.E.L.D., right? It started with Arnim Zola being taken prisoner and then slowly recruiting people to his cause, to the point where Hydra kind of had this little inner circle inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then started growing outward from there, to the point that S.H.I.E.L.D. was completely and totally controlled by Hydra on almost every single level. The only people who didn't know were either, you know, agents who Hydra made no attempt to contact to try to turn, or like staffers, right? Like the guy from the mail room who's like delivering your mail, or like the chick who's getting coffee or something like that, right? Whatever the case happened to be. And so as a result of that, what we can say here is that in the aftermath of the perceived death of Captain America, you know, S.H.I.E.L.D. was content with going on and just doing its thing, right? You know, just kind of doing whatever it was that they were doing, maybe hunting for Steve Rogers, who really knows, because Peggy Carter refused to believe he was dead. I don't know, doesn't really matter. But Hydra was hell-bent on the idea creating more Steve Rogers. They saw potential there. They saw the potential for Captain America and said, hey, look, if we can create super soldiers that are loyal to us, right? They believe in Hydra's ideologies, then like we can have our own army of Captain Americas. And who's going to stand against us, right? Who's going to be a threat that can go against us? I mean, sure, they can take out 1 or 2 Captain Americas, you know, they can take out a dozen, maybe a couple dozen. They cannot take out 3,000 Captain Americas, right? Like just a huge fighting force, right? Imagine if the entire United States Army was composed of super soldiers and all of them believed in Hydra's ideologies. They could conquer the country like that, right? It would happen so fast. And so as a result of the fact that the serum was lost when Abraham Erskine died in Captain America: The First Avenger, the guy who basically gave Steve Rogers the super soldier serum, because of the fact that he died and the details of the serum were lost with him, all Hydra could do was just guess, right? They could just like guess and experiment and that kind of a thing. And so this basically leads to the introduction of James Howlett. And James Howlett, as some of you guys may know, also goes by the name of Wolverine. And the idea is that he was basically brought in by whatever manner and whatever means. We can use the main Marvel Universe version and say he was part of like Team X, which was basically just like this Cold War era, you know, Black Ops wet work team that would like, you know, operate on behalf of the United States government. They're think of it like Mission Impossible, but instead of Tom Cruise, you got, you know, Wolverine. That's more or less what the team was. But Hydra ends up taking Wolverine and, you know, with the intention of like giving them the newest variant of the super soldier serum, but along the way discover that he has a gene that if it's activated can give him powers. And they activate the gene, Wolverine's got a healing factor. They bond adamantium to his skeleton, go forward from there. Now, the way that we explain that gene comes off the heels of the Eternals film. And we say that in the Eternals movie, much like the main Marvel Universe, Eternals showed up on Earth, they modified the genes of a portion of early man, and 1/3 of those guys went forward as Eternals, 1/3 went forward as Deviants, the other third went forward and their genes would manifest at some future point in time. And it simply just happened to be that humanity got a hold of Wolverine before the genes were supposed to manifest, right? right? Maybe they were supposed to manifest in like the year 5000, and Wolverine was discovered and the gene was discovered in like 1968 or something along those lines, whatever date we choose to assign to it. And so what you basically do is you say that Hydra activates that gene, Wolverine goes through the whole Weapon X process, he gets the adamantium, he gets, you know, the claws and all that kind of stuff, you know, and he goes forward from there. And they, you know, by whatever manner and whatever means, the activation process is basically synthesized and spread across the world. And that basically leads to all these individuals out there with a mutant gene suddenly developing powers. It was, you know, in the Ultimate Universe, that's how it was done. And so we basically just say that like Charles Xavier was essentially just a regular guy, right? He was just a normal human walking around doing whatever it was that he was doing. And then like when this activation process took place, whatever it was, then like he suddenly was bestowed upon, you know, bestowed with his powers or whatever the case happened to be. But basically this brings Charles Xavier into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then as a result, you know, Charles Xavier was there, whether he was human or mutant doesn't really matter, but Charles Xavier was there when like half the Earth's population was destroyed by Thanos. And that's the entire basis behind why the Illuminati exist. The Illuminati basically looked at the events of Infinity War and Avengers Endgame and say, we cannot let a credible threat like that happen to Earth again. We have to prevent that from happening. So we're going to operate in secret and we're going to share information with each other so that we never really have to worry about that. We can kind of nip this in the bud so that if it requires the attention of all of our respective teams, then we can bring them together. If it doesn't and we can solve that problem on our own, then we'll take care of that. The problem with the Illuminati is that they had that idea. You know, the first thing they did is after they formed, they went to the Skrull homeworld, or at least what was left of the Skrull homeworld after Galactus destroyed it. And they told the Skrull Emperor at the time, don't bring your war to Earth, right? Like, we don't want any part of that. Leave us alone, or the next time there's going to be consequences and repercussions. The Skrulls basically knocked them out, copied their DNA, and then sent them back to Earth. And then you end up getting a Secret Invasion, where you find out that the whole reason why the Skrulls were copying the DNA of superheroes was to replace them, right? With Skrull duplicates, people who could shapeshift and look like superheroes. It was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool story, if not a little bit confusing at times. But that's how you put the Illuminati in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Like so many other things that I hope you would see in the first phase or two after the events of Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, you build off that story, right? It's a great way to pay tribute to the last 10 years while also starting something new, right? So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. Now we'll catch you all later. Peace.